Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Relationship Schools podcast. I'm your host, Jason Gaddis. Greetings. Good to be with you in these difficult times with coronavirus and the economy and all that's been happening in the world. This podcast is about all things relational. It's about getting empowered through our relationship challenges. It's about connecting. It's about loving better. And we look a lot at long-term relationship, attachment science, interpersonal neurobiology, and we also look at work relationships, family relationships, friendships, and just the street level stuff that makes us more effective in our communication with other people. Okay? If you're returning, thank you, and thanks for your reviews. DH has got a good one here. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, DHZO said, I listened to all 265 episodes of this podcast over the past 2 months. Whoa, that's a binge, right? So cool. It was a deep dive into all things relationship. I've absolutely shifted my perspective, understanding, practice, and expectations of relationship. As a result, I feel freer, more available, and more aware of my own actions, thoughts, and accountability. I highly recommend it. Yeah, thanks, DH. Really appreciate it. If you want to be like DH and give some love back to the podcast here, you can leave us a review. I'd love to get to 600 soon. We're very, very close. Can you be the next 10 here? If you've gotten value from this podcast, this is just a simple way you can say, thanks, Jason. Leave us a review. Take 5 minutes out of your day and do that. That would be amazing. Would you do that? Make a silent commitment to yourself right now. Okay. Yes. Write it down. Have someone hold you accountable. And let's see some more coming in. You guys rock. Thanks. If you're new, welcome. This is I think, a badass podcast to help you get better in your relational life. We have a free community, by the way. You can go to relationshipschool.com/community if you want to join. Got to answer a few questions, and then you can get in our group of thousands and thousands of people talking right now about all things relational. I do live Facebook Q&As in there. Did one last week. It was awesome. You guys rock in that group. Thanks. And yeah. Let's do it. So in this episode, I've got Mark Divine, who wrote The Unbeatable Mind, and his new book is called Staring Down the Wolf, and it's about 7 commitments of leadership. This guy is a former Navy SEAL, a Navy SEAL trainer, and now runs his own organization training people to have mental toughness, empower their lives, resiliency, mindfulness, depth, and transformation. Apparently, less than 15% make it through the 9-month selection process for SEAL training. And he graduated as the honor man, number 1 ranked out of a class of 170. Dude, that's crazy, right? He served for 20 years, 9 active duty and 11 reserves, leading his team on reconnaissance training and classified missions in 45 different countries throughout Asia and the Middle East. Wow. He eventually built this and developed this program called SEAL Fit and Unbeatable Mind training systems to provide the same kind of tools that allow not 15%, but 90% of his trainees to lead and succeed in the most demanding training in the world and in combat. They were so effective that in 2005, Navy Special Warfare Group 1 hired Mark to run their pre-deployment certification training. Okay, it goes on and on. This guy, he's just a champ. You should read his bio. It's like, this guy is so intense. Yeah, he's got a lot of books. I follow him on Instagram, and he's always like swinging kettlebells or running on the beach with like a giant bag of sand or something. That's kind of the person we're dealing with here. This guy is quite the beast, honestly. It was a real treat to get to talk to someone so intense. And we had a great time. It was a very heartfelt conversation. I think you're going to like it. We talk about a lot of stuff in here from, resiliency. We talked even about the coronavirus. How do we deal with this in this time? Me slacking off in my workouts. I called myself out there and got some great feedback. That was stung a little bit, but it was totally true. We talked about when we want to take shortcuts, building mental toughness in teenagers. We talked about meditation and mindfulness. We even talked about enlightenment briefly. So hopefully I'll have this guy back because there was much more we could have dove into. I think you're going to like this a lot. And We get kind of nerdy there for a little bit, but you got to hear this guy's story right up front about how he got into the Navy SEALs. It's quite powerful. Okay, let's get into it. Here's Mark. All right, welcome to the show, Mark Devine.
Jason, it's an honor to be here.
Yeah,
Thanks very much.
You're welcome. I'm so psyched to get some time with you. Today, I want to talk about your experience as a Navy SEAL and with teams, and what we as relationship people listening to this podcast can learn from someone like you. But before we get into that, I'd love you to just kind of short introduction, 1 to 2 minutes. Who are you in the world?
Thanks. I'll do this as short as possible. So I am a retired Navy SEAL, as you mentioned. Spent 20 years with SEAL teams, but quite a bit more than that, actually, because I was in the business world before I was a Navy SEAL. Most people find that interesting that I was a certified public accountant for 4 years, working in Manhattan, and I got my MBA at NYU Stern School of Business. And all I can say about that is CPA on one hand, Navy SEAL on the other. One of those careers was a huge misfit for me.
For sure.
You can figure out which one. The other interesting thing, Jason, is that with my Navy SEAL career, half of it was active duty, where I was running and gunning full time, running missions. But the other half, after I got married, actually, I left active duty service for my relationship, to preserve my relationship with my wife, because being a SEAL is really hard on marriages. I mean, it's like 90% divorce rate. And we decided that we weren't going to go down that road. And so I got off active duty, but I stayed in the SEALs as a reserve officer. That was cool for a couple of reasons. One, it allowed me to get back into the business world as an entrepreneur, and which allowed me to kind of create the business that I have today and the whole life I have today. And two, it allowed me to still serve the SEALs, but in a way that was unique to my passions and my strengths, which was to train SEAL trainees and to train the operators for combat in the ways that I was doing, in a way that I was innovating. I said, and the SEALs found valuable. So that has led to, this flourishing business around training, resiliency and mental toughness and emotional awareness, integration, that type of thing. So I was able to kind of combine my passion and business, but also serve the SEALs in that way too. And now the SEALs are using a lot of the techniques that we've innovated in the SEAL BUDS training, as well as some other special ops forces like the Air Force Pararescue. So I retired from the reserves in 2011 and focused full-time on business and family since then, and also writing books. I found I have a unique passion for sharing my training knowledge and skills through writing. So I've just written my 5th book, Staring Down the Wolf, which is about emotional development for leaders, so that they can stare down their fears and their shadow and their biases and show up more authentically with their teams. Mm-hmm. and then use the teams, or have the teams cultivate a radical growth mindset around their culture, so that the teams can then develop much more potential. Yeah. So the subtitle of that book is 7 Commitments That Forge Elite Teams. And those commitments are all things that bring out greater authenticity, greater connection, greater relationship skills.
Cool. And we'll link to that in the show notes and have you talk about that at the end here. I read your first book, Unbeatable Mind, or maybe it wasn't your first. What was this, your second, third, first?
It was my second
book. Yeah. And it was really moving for me for a number of reasons, which I'll get into. And just for the listener, can we orient you around marriage? It sounds like you've been married over a couple decades, which is
huge. I got married when I was in active duty in 1994. Gosh, yeah, 94.
Okay.
And so I've been married for whatever, do the math, 25 years, 26 years.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And then you have you said a child and a couple of kids that are.
My wife had 2 daughters, so I've got 2 stepdaughters. They're grown up now, so I'm a grandfather, believe it or not, from the oldest daughter, Cindy, and then I have a 20-year-old son who we adopted. He was born in Maui. Wow. Great kid.
Okay, cool, great. And I've read some bits of your story, and I find it quite fascinating. Like the CPA, and then this kind of Navy SEAL guy, but there was also a brew pub owner stint as an entrepreneur, right?
Right. Right.
which I can relate to that. Some of your story, I was in a fraternity in college and I was pretty far away from myself. And so I was drinking and doing a lot of drugs for many years as I tried to find my way in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I was connecting with you there. When you first, I mean, you strike me as a pretty intense guy. You grew up in New York, I think, right? In the Adirondacks or something.
Right.
And I'm so curious, post college, I think you met a martial arts teacher and then eventually that led to the Navy SEALs. Is that right?
Right.
And
Right.
I love the story. If you would share just the story so people can get a little sense of your intensity of when you tried out for the Navy. I think it was when you tried out for the Navy SEALs and you got into the swimming pool and could you just tell that story? That's pretty fascinating.
Sure. Yeah. I was a competitive swimmer at college, and you and I, our college experiences sound similar, right? There was a constant juxtaposition between drinking as much beer as I could and then trying to stay disciplined within a sport, right? Which is swimming for me. And, and I somehow balanced those two, but, eventually the alcohol did catch up to me and smack me down a little bit. I tell that story in more detail than Staring Down the Wolf because that was one of my biases and shadows. But anyways, I was a fairly competent swimmer. And then when I got down to Manhattan, like you said, I did start, what really changed my life was I started a martial art with a Zen master. He was a Zen master masquerading as a karate instructor. And he was a 10th degree black belt and all that. But his passion was the mental development through Zen and movement, right? Which was the art of the karate do. And so I took up a pretty disciplined practice of Zen. And when I got to, so I had a unique perspective by the time I got to SEAL training. In fact, that whole period of time, it was the Zen bench and Nakamura's mentorship that led me away from being a Navy SEAL or away from being a CPA and into the SEALs. And I tell that story quite a bit in Unbeatable Mind, how my mind changed and my sense of self changed and what I was meant to do. My calling became revealed to me through the sitting in silence and contemplation and meditation. At any rate, I showed up at Bud's after Officer Candidate School, and the orders that they gave me, because they literally hand you a piece of paper that says you're ordered to do this. My orders said I was going to go to class 171. And I thought, that's fine. I had no idea. I just assumed that I was going to show up and the class would be there and we're going to go start training. But I show up at Bud's Training Center in Coronado, and I find out that there is a class going to start on Monday, but it's class 170. And my class isn't going to start for like 3 months down the road. And what the heck am I going to do for 3 months? What? Run around and try to stay in shape. And the waiting would have been painful, even though 3 months is not that big a deal. But I was committed to starting 170. And so I started asking around. I said, listen, I got orders to 171. I want to go to 170. Everyone's looking at me like I'm absolutely nuts. Like, what are you talking about? Right? Nobody does that. You have orders to 171. That gives you 3 months to train. They're not going to change your orders just because you want to class up on Monday and it's Friday.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't take no for an answer. So I found out that Lieutenant May, who was the guy who would make this decision on who's classing up on Monday, was down at the pool, which they call Combat Training Tank, because the SEALs love to have cool names for basic things like a swimming pool. So I go down to the Combat Training Tank, and there I walk into the deck, and there are 184, studs lined up on the deck, and they're doing like pool crossovers and stuff. And up on the high diving board is this Adonis, and it's like 6'3", blonde, tan, ripped Navy SEAL Lieutenant May, lording over his minions. It's just like a classic scene. And I walk in and the sea of students parts because here comes this, this tall, fresh meat, with the newly minted gold ensign, bars on my uniform. And Lieutenant May just like looks at me with his steely blue eyes. And even though he's way up in that diving board, I can feel them kind of piercing me. And everyone's just super quiet. And he looks at me, he goes, "How can I help you, enzyme?" Which was his name for ensign, you know what I mean? The first derogatory statement thrown in my way, one of many. And I said, "Lieutenant May, I'm Ensign Divine, and I'm looking to class up with class 170, but I have orders for 171. And he looks down at me and he goes, "Well, that's not common." Right? Like, basically, you're weird.
Yeah.
And, then he paused and he thought about it for a second. He goes, well, okay, prove to us that you're worthy of classing up in our class on Monday. He goes, swim 50 meters underwater in your full uniform. So I was like, okay, I got this. So I walked up to the edge of the pool, boots and utes and dove in. And I'm just like, of course, ever try to swim with a pair of boots on?
Oh man.
It's like dragging a kettlebell behind you. And so I was like pulling and had to use all my skills and got to the other wall, did a kickoff. And I just held that underwater recovery stroke for as long as I could. And then, 3 or 4 strokes, I was able to make it back to the other end, climbed out, stood there to await my sentence. Lieutenant May said, come see me in my office, in an hour. And when I went to the office, he didn't say much. He said, good job. I'll see you on Monday. Basically. Wow. So I classed up with class 170. And, that was a great example of just the power of the mind. Mm-hmm. When it's set in intention, we pretty much do whatever you want to do. And a lot of times the roadblocks that seem so firm and fixed in front of you literally just almost move themselves when you're really aligned and when you're committed and when your mind is fixed. Mm-hmm. And the meditation really helped me. And since I understand much more deeply how much our mind and the conditions that we set in our mind will dictate the outcomes and the reality that we experience in the outer world. And that sounds a little bit of woo-woo metaphysical, but it's actually grounded in truth and reality.
Yeah, I was a meditator for many years in a Buddhist community, and I finally learned how to be with my experience, because growing up, I didn't know how to be with my pain or my upset or my emotions or really any discomfort, honestly. So meditation was crucial for me to get kind of oriented and get centered with my whatever was occurring, right? And it seems like you teach people this. I actually I've tried your box breathing. I do a little bit of it, and I really like it, and I struggle, if you have a tip for me, I struggle with on the exhale. It seems like 5 is just, for whatever reason, hard for me. What's this sort of hack there? Should I just go down to 4?
On the exhale hold or the exhale itself?
The exhale hold.
Yeah, that's actually, I hear that a lot. And so our recommendation is to basically use a lopsided box. Boxes come in many shapes. They don't have to be perfectly formed. It's simple for me to teach the box breathing as a 5 by 5 by 5 by 5, right? Sure. Inhale 5, hold 5, exhale 5, or 4, 4, 4, 4, either way. But if someone like you experiences a little bit of anxiety, or it's like maybe a craving for oxygen with a longer, with that exhale hold, which is where it's experienced, then just shorten the exhale hold.
Okay. And then work my way up, right?
Yeah, then build your way up to it. You want this to be comfortable. It's like, like with any meditation practice or breathing practice, if it's uncomfortable, then it's going to be a distraction, which is the opposite of what you're looking for. You're looking to tame the distractible mind and to learn how to concentrate. And the box breathing practice is really powerful because it's really, when done effectively, it's a 1-2 punch, or it's a I call it double barrel power in Unbeatable Mind. It is a stacked practice because the box breathing itself is a practice of arousal control, meaning you're de-stressing your body and mind, or your body and brain. You're getting your breathing pattern reprogrammed so that you're breathing, 4 to 6 times a minute naturally when you're not practicing, which has really incredible health benefits. And you're getting your brain into a state for optimal learning and optimal attention. And that's like a high alpha, low beta state. Because the brain waves will slow down as you continue this practice over a few minutes. And then the second part, the stacked part, is it is a concentration practice, almost identical, not absolutely identical, but very, very close, I should say, to my Zen training, which was like concentration boot camp back with Nakamura. And that is just to concentrate on that breathing pattern to the exclusion of all else. And you're well aware of this from your Buddhist practice, but concentration training, like the elephant path, that was the path to higher stages of meditation. And so people who jump right into mindfulness, they really struggle because the mind is running all over the place. And it's super distracted, and you haven't trained it to really settle down and focus on just one thing. It's counterintuitive because that training then allows you, when you release the grip on the concentration object, to actually be able to observe, because now you've grounded your mind or settled your mind in more of the witnessing perspective, so you can witness and observe the thoughts and emotions that come up, as opposed to being wrapped up and elaborated in them.
Yeah, totally. So this is so important for
a little bit of tangent there, but
no, that's great. This is so important for our listeners because we get triggered, would be one of our terms, by human beings all the time, right? Someone at work, or our partner, our kids, our parents. And a lot of people actually don't know how to be with their triggers, right? They often just kind of react from that place. And so why do you think, you're sort of speaking to it here, but why is mind training and the ability to like calm the mind so essential in life?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, the quality of your life really will be dictated by the quality of your thinking. If you haven't examined your thinking and began to train your thinking, then basically it's at the whim of the social constructs and the family programming and the negative conditioning, right?
And the hedonism,
we now know through neuroscience that the brain is 5 times as negative as it is positive. So it's programmed to be 5 times as negative as it is positive, right? So, and then we're just fed all this negativity, and we just, it's rampant. So with an untrained mind, it's going to be naturally negative. Now you can mask over that with a smile and a firm handshake, and right. You can mask over that with some success and some degrees, but underneath that is the negative conditioning that's still there. It might be below consciousness or subconscious, and it might just be masked over. So now you're projecting something that is actually not happening. But underneath, what's really happening is causing you to feel weak or to feel triggered, like you said, the word triggered. So whether you wear that on your sleeve and in some sort of outburst of anger, or jealousy, or rage, or you let that simmer inside, either way, it's probably actually healthier to let it come out. But either way, it's not healthy for relationships. So mental training allows you to begin to control the chatter, what the Buddhists call that monkey mind, so that then, instead of a wildly raging mind, you're actually able to control it. Now, that doesn't mean you've eradicated the negative conditioning, but you're able to now train the mind to eradicate the negative conditioning because it's under control. It's like a stair-step process, right? First, I got to, like when I do weapons training, first I got to learn how to hold the weapon and take a stance and dry fire. And that's basically fundamental building blocks. And so that's like concentration training when it comes to training the mind. And once I get that down, then I start to fire live rounds, and I can begin to get more effective with putting the round on target, and then more effective putting the round on target consistently in the center of the target. So as mental training continues, we're able to now begin to examine the patterns that are driving our behavior. And that's basically for the most part, examine both the positive and the negative, but it's the negative that we want to zero in on. And so we begin to see recurring patterns, negative patterns that happen when we're triggered. And we can be triggered by, like you said, a human being, a relationship, a wife, a child, parent, in-law, a coworker, or a boss. Or we can be triggered by an event like coronavirus, which causes, fear. And fear, that fear virus then triggers your internal negative fear loops. And all of a sudden you find yourself all seized up and you're triggered and you get into these reactionary patterns. And so mental training, when you calm your mind and you're still and you've developed that concentrated mind, then you turn the flashlight of awareness on those patterns and you can see the big ones that are disrupting your life. And you take care of the biggest ones first. It's like addiction, right? Is a good example.
Yeah.
Like for me, I had alcohol run through many generations of my family, and it was all fine and good in college. I partied with the boys and in the fraternity, but then I would go swim and be really disciplined. And I convinced myself that it was no big deal, that I only drank on weekends or, once in a while. And then I carried that in the SEAL teams, and same thing. We'd be out training for weeks and not have a drop of alcohol in sight, but then we'd come back and just all go nuts. And so it was a pattern. And I had to take a look at that pattern because that was part of my negative reactionary conditioning. And what triggered it for me was this feeling that I deserved it after hard work, after a hard week of work, or after a hard training evolution. And then I didn't have a shutoff valve, and I'm not alone in this at all.
Oh, yeah. I've been there. Yep.
Right. So that is an example of a negative condition pattern that was basically both epigenetic and planted by my family by observing how they behave and adopting that behavior. That was tripping me up and holding me back. And it was my meditation that, sure, this is a pretty overt one because, you have things that consequences in real life that slap you down. And then, so it's pretty easy to see that, but it's harder to see why you have this pattern. And so most people never look at the underlying pattern. They just try to brute force deal with the behavior. And that doesn't work very well. It's hard. Yeah. It's a really hard path. And then it can work for somebody, but you got to go to an AA meeting like 3 times or 4 times a week or even every day to have basically that reminder, don't drink, don't drink, don't drink. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you meditation, you go and you examine the underlying thought patterns and emotional patterns, and you begin to dissect those and then de-energize them and change the story around them until essentially the pattern begins to dissolve and you choose a better pattern. And so, like the Tibetans would say that meditation, if you stick with it long enough and you do it skillfully, will eradicate your negative qualities, which will then allow your natural and innate positive qualities to flourish. I truly believe that to be the case.
Yeah. So when you're meditating, you said something interesting there, because a lot of people, their context for meditation is maybe emptiness, or I'm just going to follow the breath and shamatha meditation. But I kind of heard you saying you're actually using meditation to then kind of pinpoint problems and solve them using your mind. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Using imagery, using analyzing the story that you've attached to the energetic expressions or feelings that you had in an early age. A lot of these patterns are, cemented in early childhood. There's even the Buddhist tradition from Buddhist psychology said that there's 3 primary periods of life: 0 to 7, 7 to 14, and 14 to 21. Pretty much everything after 21 is, it's not going to root into some negative trauma situation. I'm not, it's not that it can't happen.
Sure.
But most of our negative conditioning comes from early childhood, the first 7 years, and then, in lesser extent, the 7 to 14, and then even lesser, the 14 to 21, because our brain is getting more and more mature, but it's still not fully mature until I'm mid-20s. So my training and the way that I've evolved it for Unbeatable Mind is we want to use our mind to hasten the process of eradicating negative tendencies, because that'll allow us to continue or go deeper into the meditative practices like emptiness or, pure awakening quicker.
Yeah.
So we're not leaving it to chance. So even, if you really get into like Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or some of the deeper practices in like Zazen, they really are talking about, even in emptiness training, talking about emptying the grab, emptying or recognizing that even the emotional patterns, the negativity is all empty of form. When you detach from it, when you begin to access the state, those are just temporary thoughts, and you can become like as vast as the sky, and the way, the clouds of emotion are just clouds that kind of pass by, and you're not grabbed by them. That's kind of the metaphor. So that's hard for a lot of people to grasp that, because we're so distracted, and our brains are so trained to be identified with thinking and emotions.
Yeah.
That what I've found is that it's easier, it helps me anyways, and helps my clients to go deeper in meditation by almost attacking the negative qualities instead of just hoping that they go away someday.
Oh, interesting. And what would attacking look like? What do you mean by that?
Identifying first, when you identify through your own awareness training the big patterns, you know what I mean? Let's
use an example. Let's say it's the coronavirus, and I'm just going into a fear loop, and I'm just kind of super anxious and freaked out.
So beneath if you have something like the coronavirus come up and you're going to a freak out fear loop, then underneath that, so the coronavirus is just the latest trigger. You're not really afraid of the coronavirus. You're afraid of what? Death. So you've actually stumbled upon probably the biggest cloud that most people have, right? And that is fear of death.
Yeah.
And in fact, meditation training is to train for death. Totally. Right? So you can do it skillfully. So there you go. Start with that big one and begin to dissect that. What does it mean, right? And what ends up coming, you come back to the breath practice and you recognize that literally every exhale is, a death. Like it both representative of death and also in a very real sense. In that moment of the exhale and the exhale hold, you have died to the moment. That moment will never come again. You are actually in a moment, or a point of time where you've exhaled life, because breath is life. And, you are practicing death.
Yeah.
And what you experience is pure awareness and pure presence in that moment. And the fear of death begins to go away as you practice with that level of awareness. And so you can begin to unpack it. And there are other practices that you're well aware of to actually confront your death and to prepare for that. And so as you do this, you end up, the fear of death begins to just slip away from you. Yeah. And recognize that your essential nature is still there, with or without this body.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful practice. That is probably the most difficult, but that would be like a core practice for a serious meditation student, right? Because that one pretty much supersedes all the other ones.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
The other ones are more, like for me, it was the addictive patterns around alcohol. That one I had to penetrate and look at. And we use a process we call recapitulation for this, where I actually got this from the Toltec tradition. The Toltec warriors would, by the way, for the listeners, a lot of my training is contextualized from the warrior traditions, because I was in martial arts, and that's how I got introduced to meditation, through Zen and the martial arts. Then I was a Navy SEAL, and I learned arousal control and concentration.
You're also Ashtanga practitioner, right?
I'm a Ashtanga yoga certified teacher, Vinaya yoga certified teacher, and I now study Aikido, which is the art of peace. And I love Aikido. It's a really cool art. But anyway, so a lot of my teaching comes from the warrior traditions. And so I'm able to, that's good for me, because I'm able to teach it in a sectarian way, which is a lot of Americans appreciate, because not everyone wants to put on a set of robes like you did. It's just not their thing. You know what I mean? And I've studied at Zen Mountain Monastery, and I can tell you, it's a powerful to go into a monastic type setting, but you really have to be called for that.
Yeah.
Not many Americans are.
Yeah.
So anyways, recapitulation is, the Toltecs had their young warriors, before they were initiated into the warrior class or whatever they would call that. You had to essentially go back in time and relive every single day, every single interaction, every single relationship, and basically let go of and forgive any screw-ups, to eradicate regrets, to release the energy of regret, the energy of coulda, shoulda, woulda, anything from your past that is holding you back. And they would do this all the way back to birth. That was the theory. Part of that training was to help them develop deep concentration and visualization skills. And the other part was to ensure that they weren't carrying any kettlebells of regret into their future. Because as a warrior, you had to have a pure heart and a pure, clear mind. You couldn't have anything that could slow you down. So I've adopted that. And we have when it comes to these patterns that we're talking about, negativity, once you identify the pattern, then you use a process of mental recapitulation, where you go back in time with imagery, and you find the moments when you were triggered, and examine what triggered you, examine the reaction, examine what's underneath that. And then you relive it, to reframe it, recontextualize it, add a different energy to it. So first you forgive, and then you forgive yourself, forgive others if you were hurt by others. And then you basically see yourself as whole and, a different person as a result of that. So you're basically rechanging the memory, or you're changing up the memory. And then you go back further and further until you get to the very root of it. So for me, like with the addictive patterns, I literally had to go back all the way to early childhood. My earliest memory is me sitting on a high chair at a birthday party. And there's a bunch of people around singing happy birthday to me. My mom's bringing me this birthday cake. She sets it down on the little table on my high chair, and I just take my arm and I go, whoom, and fling it onto the floor.
Whoa.
So clearly I wasn't very happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was reacting to all the anger and chaos in my house. And my dad was a rager, and he was under a lot of pressure at work and this and that, of course. But he was just living out the patterns. So I had to go back all the way to that, and also examine my parents and go back to their childhood, and to see that, my dad was actually part of a family that was raging and had alcohol, and he just adopted those patterns, and so he was doing exactly what he was trained to do.
Yeah. And
then I was doing what I was trained to do, and when I saw that and I could see that back multiple generations, I was like, "Oh, I can change this."
That's
so
cool.
I need to hold on to that energy.
It's interesting
that's what I'm talking about. The visualization is a really powerful tool to use for past and future kind of architecting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do something similar with our coaches around changing our perceptions around the past. Do you feel like it's just interesting and cool to hear someone like you with your experience talk about going into the past? I would think you might get some projections that a Navy SEAL is like, you just got to be tough, and you sort of compartmentalize that. You put that shit over there, and you just kind of carry on with the mission, your life, whatever the issue is at hand. Is there a little bit of truth in both? Like, do you do that sometimes, but you also need to go deal with the shit that's holding you back?
Yeah, that's very astute. Yeah, absolutely. So staying mission focused is important. When the time comes for it's game on with training and then a mission, and then whatever you do in real life, for those who are not Navy SEALs, which is most people.
Yeah.
This is the process that we teach of mental and emotional control. And so we have a very specific process we call it the worm, which is like attention control. So instead of mindfully just watching whatever comes up, we watch what comes up, and then we say, no, 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 yes. Mm-hmm. We want to focus on this right here, right now. And then because we've also practiced our concentration, then that becomes the object of our concentration. Mm-hmm. We call that front sight focus. Just laser in on that one task that's going to move you toward mission accomplishment. And we do this as a team, just constantly driving toward focusing on the right things.
Okay.
And then the emotional control is essentially looking at using that same process for the emotions that come up. Fear comes up. No, not going to have debilitating fear. I'm going to change my relationship to that energy and turn it into excitement or mission readiness or determination, something like that. Now, that is all good. And many Navy SEALs and military operators stop there. And those skills serve them well later on as entrepreneurs or business leaders. However, it's my experience that if you don't do the emotional work, use these skills in a different way for the emotional work, then that will nip you in the butt sooner or later. And this is why a lot of military operators are coming up out of the service with post-traumatic stress. People tend to think mistakenly that the post-traumatic stress is all about combat, the stress they get in combat. My experience with working with vets, and we have a foundation to work with vets called the Courage Foundation, is that it's the combat that exacerbates and exposes the pre-existing trauma that existed before they went in the military. Yeah. And so if we had a practice to do both mental and emotional control as well as mental and emotional awareness and eradicating the negative patterns caused by childhood trauma, then you would have a much more aware warrior and one that would be pre-resilient and wouldn't be predisposed to getting the combat-related stress.
Yeah, it's huge. It's, again, so cool to hear you speaking sensitively, I think, to this subject, because it's so well known by, say, therapists, coaches, psychiatrists, but maybe in the military it's less accepted. And I know there's greater openness with MDMA-assisted psychotherapy for PTSD
it's starting to happen.
More integrative approaches to healing, which is so cool. But yeah, if we don't deal with the underlying trauma, the childhood trauma, often it's just compounded and exacerbated, right?
It's compounded, especially also with the TBI. Now, TBI is traumatic brain injury is a real issue with military, just like it is in like football or something like that, because for years it was downplayed. It's like, nah, we didn't really know much about it.
Yeah.
But they're finding that most vets have, if you're working around weapons, not all vets work around weapons, but in the SEALs, you're shooting weapons all the time and you're blowing things up all the time. And then you add combat to that when you don't have the opportunity to wear ear protection and, take all the precautionary measures. TBI is a big deal.
Totally.
And so to recover from that, and that exposes all sorts of things, because now you're rattling the brain and all of a sudden all that underlying trauma is starting to come up. Yeah. One of my friends, this is probably interesting to your listeners, but one of my friends who was on my board at the Courage Foundation for a couple of years is named Josh Mance. And he wrote a book called Darker Souls, I think. Something like that. Something of the Darker Soul. But he was killed in combat. He was dead for 15 minutes. And they were working to resuscitate him for far longer than, anyone normally would do it, like in an ER situation. But there was something, the medics just felt like, we can't let this guy go. But he was flatlined. And after 15 minutes, he came back.
Wow.
And he tells a story about exactly what we're talking about. He went through this massive, depressive period of his life where he almost committed suicide several times and whatnot. And he was very clear that it wasn't because of the combat death. It wasn't because he died on the battlefield and, had some emotional reaction to that. It's because that whole situation and facing his own death exposed all the childhood trauma in him. And it took him years and years to really understand that and to get the proper help, from therapy and whatnot to uncover all that. That's a powerful story.
Yeah, so powerful. It just has me think about just our culture right now and kind of where we're at as a society. And, we've got the coronavirus going on. We got the economy tanking. There's a lot happening and people are stressed and people are afraid. And it seems to me when I look around let's say pre-coronavirus, pre-economy, whatever, it seems to me that people really struggle to work with their own mind. There's not a lot of mental toughness, it seems like, when I look around. Would you agree with that assessment?
I would, and I think people are way too obsessed with the external, stuff around them. That they spend a lot of too much time on social media. They're concerned about their appearances and how they, show up to other people, and so we've been trained in the West almost exclusively to focus outwardly.
Yeah. And
yet the mind is not an outward thing. It's an inward thing, right? And so when we begin to even think differently by looking inward and saying, okay, what's this experience that I'm calling mind? And how do I, as a human being, begin to take control of that and to be able to curate that experience? Then what you get is what looks like mental toughness to other people. Like mental toughness, people mistake it to think like you're going to do barbell curls with your brain and your brain's going to get stronger.
Right.
Well, is that really the case? No, your brain actually just gets a little bit more effective at clarifying reality, at making good decisions, at understanding what's real and what's not real, and understanding, at detaching from all the chaos and the VUCA. We use that term in the military: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity that's going on outside of you, because you can't control any of that. Yeah. So you just focus on what you can control, which are your thoughts and your emotions, or at least your relationship with your thoughts and your emotions. And once you begin to learn that through these practices that we've been talking about, box breathing, concentration, and mindfulness, and others, visualization, then your entire orientation to the outer world changes, and you become less, triggered by things like coronavirus and the stock market collapse and whatnot. One of the really cool things that we do to start, and I don't know where I got this, but just say this: the 5x5 rule. It's like, okay, something happens like coronavirus, just pause and ask, is this going to matter in 5 years? And if it's not gonna matter in 5 years, then don't spend more than 5 minutes thinking about it.
Okay.
Just go wash your hands again. Right?
Yeah.
That's a simple metaphor, but you collapse that down to each breath, right? In the SEALs, we say pause, breathe, think, then act. PBTA. Paused, interrupt the amygdala, which is going fear, fear,
Yep.
right? Breathe, which triggers the parasympathetic nervous system, which says, calm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from that place, from a non-reactive place, begin to think,
Mm-hmm.
what does this mean to me? Is it really a life-threatening situation? Is the coronavirus going to kill me? Is it going to kill my loved ones? Is it going to hurt the economy? So the answer to all those is probably not. And yes to the economy, but it will recover because we're extraordinarily resilient.
Yeah.
And even, economic downturns are common. So is it really that big a deal? Maybe. If it is, then what are you going to do about it, right? So you just start, pause, breathe, think it through one step at a time. And then you figure out, what action can I take right now that's going to have the biggest impact and move me away from the fear and toward courage? Because doubt is eliminated by action. So do something. Well, is that something to run to the store and help the rest of the community strip it of all toilet paper and,
Right.
hand wash? Probably not.
Probably not.
Right? What would it be? What would be a more powerful action?
Mm-hmm.
Consider that, figure out what it is, and then go take that action.
Cool.
And then do this, repeat the process.
Yep. What did you call it? 5 by 5 by 5?
5 by 5 rule.
Yeah. 5 by 5 rule.
If
Cool.
it's not going to matter in 5 years, don't spend more than 5 minutes on it.
Yeah. One thing I noticed, I'd just love to get your quick take on this, is I used to work for Outward Bound. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I love Outward Bound. Yeah. It's a great program.
So the founder, Kurt Hahn, as you may know, was this Jewish guy during World War II who stood up to Hitler, got thrown in jail. And he was out seeing all these kids, these young men on boats dying, and the older men weren't dying. And so he started to see that younger men were struggling with their mind and
Right.
also working with adversity. So he created the Outward Bound School as one, corollary to that, to say, look, we need to develop more resilient young men in the face of adversity. Mm-hmm. And I love that, because at Outward Bound, that's what we would teach kids, right? It's like we take them in nature, strip them of all their comfort for weeks, sometimes months. And it was amazing to see kids come alive in that environment. And I also worked at a wilderness therapy program that was similar. Anyway, do you think, what could we do to develop, say, young people, adolescents? What could we do to help them be more resilient in the face of adversity?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I love the Outward Bound and Knowles and these programs like wilderness trekking. And I've taken my son on those types of programs. And I wish he would do more, because he, just like a lot of teenagers these days, or he's 20 now, they, have learned to avoid discomfort because it's really easy now. Right?
Yeah.
We've made life way too comfortable. The only way to develop that, like you said, with Outward Bound, is to actually, in my opinion, to find, to insert yourself into situations that are uncomfortable. So, we do this through physical training with SEAL Fit and uncomfortable team exercises and things like that. And so, I think we need more and more dialogue around the benefits and the growth that accrues from getting uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And instead of removing physical education from schools, we need to bring it back into schools, right? And instead
push kids, right?
Yeah, instead of having all work or internships be kind of inside, sitting in the office, learning office politics, they should require, labor or physical discomfort, discomforting things. Like when I worked for my father, at the Vine Brothers when I was 16, he put me back in the warehouse in the stockroom and basically told them, whatever you do, he does. You know what I mean? So I'm hauling these big metal things around and getting dirty. And then I became a construction worker, and all these things are just kind of like kids avoid that. So now how do you get parents to buy into this to really support?
That's part of the issue, right? It's
part
getting
of the issue,
parents to push
and parents need to do this too, because everyone, this culture of avoiding discomfort and moving toward comfort, it's like opposite day. You need to do the opposite.
Yeah.
Because suffering actually comes from staying in your comfort zone and basically not pushing against the inertia that's happening.
I like that reframe. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So play up the day and do something uncomfortable. I start every day with a cold shower, and then I do my practices, and there's days that I don't want to do it. There's days I don't want to get up at 5 and go to a keto, but you do it, and then you feel really good about it until the discomfort goes away. And now the new normal is the appreciating the growth.
Yeah. That was, listeners might want to rewind that section. I know I'm going to. I have a sub question about this, just to call myself out here or forward, is I notice I'll do these. I had shoulder surgery a year and a half ago, and I would do my band work and all my physical therapy. I finally was like super disciplined about it until my shoulder was good. And then I was like, okay, I'm done.
Right.
Like I'm cool now. But I'm learning that as I age, that I have to earn my health, right, for the rest of my life. It's not something I do for a couple months. It's something I'm going to do forever. But I notice I'll cut corners. Like how would you coach me if I'm cutting corners? Like instead of doing 10 reps or 3 sets of 10 on something, I'll do 2 sets, and then I'll somehow in my mind justify why I shouldn't do that third set. Right. So like what's any tips there?
For me, Jason, the mindset is that the way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Yeah.
It's the small things that count. I'll give you an example of something that happened in one of our SEAL Fit trainings. So we run these 50 hours hardcore. It's like, triple outward bound on steroids. It's based on the Navy SEALs Hell Week, 50 hours of nonstop physical, mental, emotional team training.
Okay.
So people come to this train, they're prepared. They really want to transform because of the experience. And, but at the same time, you see how people's patterns, and triggers will trip them up and they quit or they get injured, I put quotes on that because a lot of times they're really quitting because the injury is brought on by their mental weakness or lack of focus or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyways, one of these events, we do this workout in the middle of after hour 12 called Murph. And it's named after Michael Murphy, Navy SEAL, who won the Medal of Honor, was killed in Afghanistan. And he was a CrossFitter. So we inject this CrossFit workout in, which is a mile run with a weight vest on. So they have 20, actually we had a 20-pound backpack on them. Then they do 100 push-ups, 100 pull-ups, 200 push-ups, 300 air squats, and finish up with another mile run. It takes about an hour. At any rate, this guy got through that whole workout. He's been through 12 hours of training. Now he's doing this workout with his team. And the second mile run, it's midnight, and he has to run down a half mile to a turnaround, which is at Swami's Park in Encinitas, overlooking the ocean, and touch this mosaic wave that was built there a while ago. And then that's the turnaround. And so he gets down to the entry to this park. He's got like 50 yards to go before he gets to this mosaic wave. And he stops, turns around, and heads back, not thinking that anyone is watching. But one of our SEAL Fit coaches was lurking in the shadows, just looking for how people are going to, exactly, looking for the shortcutter. Sure enough, here he is. He's 12 hours into training. He's committed, spent thousands of dollars for this thing. And in that moment, he cut 50 meters out of a mile-long run.
Right.
And we got back, and he got back, and this coach came back, this Navy SEAL, and just looked at this guy and looked at him like a piercing gaze and just asked him, I said, where else in your life are you cutting corners? Right? And by the way, you fail this evolution because you did not complete it. And this guy was devastated because he knew, right? He knew that he cheated. And so here's the thing. The way you do anything is the way you do everything. If you cut corners, somebody knows. You.
Yeah.
And
I always know.
Every time you do that, it's like death by 1,000 cuts because you're essentially slicing into your mental toughness. You're taking a bite out of your confidence.
Yeah.
You're weakening yourself.
Yeah.
So that's the attitude. I'm not saying you, Jason, are weakening yourself.
No,
but as you're listening, you're thinking, yeah, you're right. Because every time I don't go the distance, then I'm leaving something on the table And then that starts to build up over time to where then all of a sudden, maybe you're leaving a little bit more on the table and then a little bit more. And then all of a sudden you just stop working out or you stop doing whatever.
Yeah.
So that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is like we have a precious opportunity in this life to evolve, to be good people, to serve powerfully in a alignment with our dharma, our calling. And we need our bodies and our minds to be there for us, not to be working against us. I mean, nothing hurts me more than to see someone who's broken, unhealthy, ambulant even, out of control. And then it's like, what's left after that? A daily struggle for survival. Now they can't fulfill their calling. They're not able to master themselves because their minds and bodies are breaking down. And so the whole premise of their existence is basically crumbling underneath them. Mm-hmm. And yet they might still have 10, 20, 30 years ahead of them of that suffering.
Totally.
And that's suffering, right?
Yeah.
So the way against suffering is to challenge your body and mind every day to stay sharp, to get better, to be strong in a way that's appropriate for your age, but to continue doing that. Mm-hmm. You move every day. You fuel yourself effectively and eat less than, eat high quality food, eat less than, everyone tells you you're supposed to eat, because that's the body responds positively to that. Your immune system gets strong. You sleep 7 to 8 hours a night because that's what your body needs to recover. And you do your practices because that's what your mind needs to be whole and integrated. And this allows you to continue to serve for right up to your very last breath.
Yeah. Cool, man. That's the ass kicking I needed. Thank you.
No extra charge.
Yeah, exactly. As we wind down here, a couple more questions for you. I know you've studied Ken Wilber. You studied Ashtanga yoga many years. You've studied, Zen and all these amazing forms, and you've integrated them into the work you do. How do you teach your students and clients how to reconcile self-mastery, which is kind of what we're talking about here, versus self-acceptance?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think they go hand in hand, right? So most people, when they start self-mastery, they think about, it's all about learning how to perform better, like a Navy SEALs. I'm mastering myself so I can shoot straight and I can engage a target in control on the battlefield and get the mission done. And performance is, again, outer, like we were talking about earlier. It's doing things. Whereas true self-mastery, once you get into it, you recognize that you're also curating and cultivating the field of potential, which precedes performance. Mm-hmm. It actually coincides with performance. So think of like the yin-yang symbol. The yang, the active, the expressive, is the field of performance. The yin, the acceptance, the surrender
Receiving
part of it, is potential. And the line between them is your moment-to-moment reality, where your potential is unfolding into your performance. So we start understanding that by improving our performance using performance enhancement techniques, and improving our potential by using mental emotional training techniques, until they begin to come together. And that martial arts idea of action in non-action, and right where the potential for whatever outcome exists right here, you decide what that outcome is going to be, and then you act. And all that happens very at the speed of intention, not at the speed of thought. That's like the goal of mastery. Mm-hmm. Now, in order to get there, we have to let go of all of our precious beliefs that, have propped us up, our ego identification beliefs that have propped us up over the years, and empty our cup, right? Yeah, like the Zen master, that story of, the student who comes in is full of concepts and wants to learn the secret techniques right away. And the Zen master says, sit down, let's have some tea. And he starts pouring tea, and pretty soon the cup's full, and then it starts flowing all over the place. And the student's like, Master, you're spilling the tea. And he says, well, this teacup and everything flowing over represents your mind. I can't teach you if your mind is flowing over with all these concepts and ego identifications. First, you must empty your cup. So self-acceptance is emptying your cup. Mm-hmm. Letting go. One of my favorite meditations comes from Ramana Maharshi, and it's Who Am I meditation. This is actually classic in Buddhism as well. Ramana Maharshi was a yogi. But it's to sit down and meditate on that question, who am I? And I like to add the word really at the end of it. Who am I really?
Totally. Yep.
You start by looking at all the things that we have and the degrees and ways other people identify you. So people identify me, Mark, as a Navy SEAL, a commander, MBA, CPA, author, New York Times bestselling author, entrepreneur. It's all bullshit, right? And so you get past that and then you say, who am I really? And then you begin to think, well, I'm really maybe my beliefs, right? So I'm a Westerner. I was brought up in a Christian family, so those beliefs are there. And I'm a warrior, right? And I'm strong, and all this kind of stuff. And then you think, am I really that? Is that really who I am? And then when you recognize that sense of self, that aspect is really just a bunch of concepts, right? And I can actually take those concepts and throw them out, but I'm still here. Now I'm getting closer to the truth.
Yeah.
Right. And that's actually a really powerful practice for awakening, because when you look for yourself within yourself, you end up finding that's empty as well. Mm-hmm. Concept of self is empty.
Do you believe?
Very, very powerful practice.
Do you believe in enlightenment?
Do I believe in enlightenment, or do I believe enlightenment is a reality or possibility for humans?
Yeah, the latter.
I do. I think it's that one of the beliefs that I have had, which is an obstacle, is that it's really hard to attain. It could take many lifetimes. It's probably not going to happen with me because I'm a Westerner and a householder and I'm busy and blah, blah, blah. And it takes, the yogis who attained it, trained for 23.5 hours a day. You know what I mean?
Right.
Whereas what I've experienced through the developmental path that I've been on is that, and from what I've observed in some other masters that I've trained with, is that enlightenment is accessible, and that we can overcomplicate it. And I think the thing that most people miss, especially Westerners who come to these practices, they think that we have to sit on a mat or join a monastic tradition to actually have a chance. And the reality is that the real core practice is right here and right now. It's what we're doing right here, right now. And then it's what we're going to do next. And then what we're going to do next. The practice is in the moment. And even the Buddha said you can find enlightenment in a single breath if you're paying attention.
It's like Trungpa Rinpoche said, it's meditation in action,
Right. Taking it off the mat, so to speak, or off the bench. And that's where I've taken my practice. I still like to do seated practice because it's very calming, it's comfortable, it's familiar. I can do a little bit more, go a little deeper with the imagery and whatnot. But my core practice is a practice of non-attachment, moment to moment, to really try to see everything that's arising as empty of grab and empty of any need to be reactive and to latch onto it. And so it is to try to stabilize or maintain a stabilized awakening. And then that leads us to where the more grounded we are in that stabilized awakening state, where you're not identifying with your egoic structures, but you're more identified with awareness itself, then we can begin to move off where moment to moment you're burning off negative qualities and negative karma, right? The buildup of negative karma.
Yeah.
And I think that once you begin that process, it can happen very quickly. And so to me, enlightenment is when you've stabilized awakening and then you've burned off all your negative karma. Mm-hmm. And you're not accruing any more negative karma. And you're 100% prepared for the moment of death. But you're still here and you're serving all sentient beings from an open, compassionate heart. Those are the, and the experience, moment to moment experience is super vivid, very, very alive, expansive.
Yeah.
That type of thing. And I have, I'm not claiming to be enlightened by any stretch of the imagination, but I've had tastes of the stabilized awakening state. And that's kind of, if you would say, where are you on your practice? I'd say, I'm working to stabilize awakening.
Yeah.
Very cool. That's why practicing is so important to me, because I think ultimately, even if someone doesn't figure this out until their deathbed, the reason that we're here on this planet as human beings is to master ourselves or perfect ourselves or to evolve ourselves and to serve humanity, serve other sentient beings in a way that's uniquely suited to our dharma, and that's influenced by our karmic energy from past life decisions as well as the decisions we've made in this life.
Very cool, man. Last question. I ask all my guests this, and if here at the Relationship School, we have a mission to reach 1 million teens and young adults with relationship education. So kids they know how to work out their differences, so they turn into adults that actually can communicate and listen and et cetera.
Great.
So if I had a group of 1,000 high schoolers and I could only teach them one thing about relationship or love, what would you want me to tell them if you were whispering in my ear?
That we are not separate. That individual over there that I'm trying to relate to is, in a lot of ways, just like me, and we're connected. And my thoughts toward this individual will affect that individual, and vice versa. We're in this together. We're a team. So let's, move toward a relationship where it's based on mutual understanding and respect, as opposed to one of separation and me versus him. It's us. We're in this together.
Yeah, beautiful. Cool, Mark. Well, dude, thanks for your commitment to excellence. It's so inspiring to just get some time with you and to read your material and learn from you. So I really appreciate what you're doing for the world.
Thank you for having me on and allowing me to share. We had some interesting, deep conversations. I really appreciate that. I don't get that very often.
Oh, cool. You got it.
I mostly get asked about Navy SEAL, stuff, and I love talking about the practices of mental and emotional development. It's very important for everyone.
Yeah, awesome. So where can people find you? Where's the best place? Tell us about your new book.
So the new book is called Staring Down the Wolf. We have a book page called, staringdownthewolf.com, which talks about it. Also, there's a free video training on all the 7 commitments. The 7 commitments are courage, trust, respect, growth, excellence, resilience, and alignment. And they're both personal practices and team practices. So, and everyone's a leader, so it's for all leaders, right? Mm-hmm. Young or old. And then my personal website is markdevine.com, which is where you can find out about my other books and about my podcast, which is the Unbeatable Mind podcast, where I get to do what you're doing, but with other guests, and speaking engagements and stuff like that. Now, the Unbeatable Mind training itself can be found at unbeatablemind.com. That's where we train corporate leaders and teams and have a coaching program like you do. We have several hundred certified coaches, and we're certifying more every day. So if anyone's interested in becoming a certified coach in Unbeatable Mind, we have a program there. And then the hardcore physical training is called SEAL Fit, and that's sealfit.com. That's where we do the intense crucible training for athletes and warriors.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Lots of places to go. We'll put those in the show notes again. Mark, thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome, Jason. Thanks very much, buddy.
Hey, everyone. How about that? Mark Devine. Go check out Mark at markdevine.com. And there you can see all his books, 8 Weeks to SEAL Fit, Way of the SEAL, Unbeatable Mind, Staring Down the Wolf, etc. Check him out, okay? If you resonate with like intensity and mind training, especially from a Navy SEAL / spiritual yogi guy, I think this guy is amazing. So check him out. All right, action step. Well, I think, him calling me out there was really helpful. I just kind of needed that kick in the pants. I need to be witnessed in my shortcutting sometimes, like how you do anything is how you do everything. I know I'm cutting corners elsewhere in my life. So now I'm starting to look at, where am I doing that? Anyway, I have a new commitment to finish my reps. If I say I'm going to do 3 reps of 10 of something, and I'm not a big weightlifter, by the way. I do more physical therapy stuff. Or 3 sets of squats, I'm going to do 3 sets of squats. Okay. And I'm going to notice, like, am I wanting to shortcut and what am I trying to wiggle out of here? And then I'm going to get accountability with 2 men in my life. So why don't you do something similar? Where are you cutting corners? And name that place, get accountability with a friend and just say, honey, partner, friend, I am cutting corners when I am doing my workout, when I am writing my book, when I am practicing music, when I'm practicing dance, when I'm applying for that job or whatever I'm doing. You're probably like me, you're cutting corners somewhere. I think it's kind of human nature. Hopefully I'm not the only one. No, I know a lot of people struggle with this. So where you cutting corners and get accountability, call yourself out, call yourself forward, call yourself in and say, I'm doing this. And then make a new commitment with that friend about what you're going to do now. Okay? All right. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, finally, remember, we have an amazing workshop coming up with the coronavirus stuff. People are going to be probably traveling less, and the economy being where it is, people are going to spend less perhaps. But if you're someone who wants to experience me live and you want to get some of the downloads on how we do conflict, for example, I highly, highly recommend you come to our live training, Accepted and Connected, because that's what you want, right? Well, if you want to feel accepted and connected, you're going to have to go through conflict and learn a few things that you don't know or you aren't practicing very well. So regardless of whether people can fly or not, we are hosting this event virtually via live stream if it can't be in person. So this event is on 100%, it's happening. And just go to relationshipschool.com/connected. Okay, so you can come from anywhere in the world, and right from your own home, you can come to this event. All right. And even if we do open it up to in person, we will have both live stream and in person, and it should be a good time. And we've never done this before, so it's going to be an experiment, but we have some creative ways for you to do partner exercises and have a good experience. Okay. And don't worry, you're not going to be sitting at your computer for 2.5 days straight. We will mix it up. We'll take long breaks. You can go on a walk. You can go do some stuff. Then we'll come back to the screen and get some downloads. Okay? Yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be intense. I want you there. Go to relationshipschool.com/connected to sign up now. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we'll see you soon. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Relationship School fans and Smart Couple listeners, please subscribe to this YouTube channel, all right? Do us a favor, subscribe, share one of these videos with a friend, all right? We want to help the planet get their act together around relationships, and you are one of them, so thank you.